This is the Bend Ash Wind Farm. Very atmospheric this evening with the mist, such a calm evening. I've just measured the wind turbine behind me. It's 75 metres to the centre of the hub, and I'd estimate that the tip of the blade at its highest point would be 125 metres. This is a restricted flying zone. I measured it using a drone and the limitation is 120 metres. But I'd say my estimate of 125 metres is plausible and probably accurate. A planning application to install 14 150 metre tall wind turbines on the bogland opposite my property has been submitted by Cloonkett Green Energy, a subsidiary of a company called Green Source. This will be the view from my living room windows and front door. Several of the other proposed wind turbines will be visible from my property. I'm just showing you the one that's closest. It says on their website, and I quote, "Our team has already engaged extensively with landowners in the area." A year or so ago, possibly even two, a couple of their representatives came round and gave me a leaflet. Around 6 to 8 weeks ago, another leaflet was posted out. Hardly extensive. Are property prices negatively impacted by proximity to wind farms? Absolutely. Here's the test. Which would you pay more for? A property with a view like this? Or this? When I first came to Ireland and was looking for a house, there was a suitable one. It was next to a wind turbine. I didn't give it a second look. I'm not opposed to wind turbines per se, though neither I nor my neighbours should be expected to personally subsidise them. So I'll be objecting on the grounds that no compensation has been offered for the decrease in my equity. No consultation with me personally or in a public meeting took place as claimed on the Cloonkett Green Energy website. Studies suggest that property values decrease by 25% or more for those closest to the turbines. They can't be installed within 600 metres of a personal dwelling, and I'm within a few metres of that limit. It's effectively the other side of the single track road at the end of my driveway. It would be reasonable to value my property at around €400,000. It's more than doubled in the 10 years since I bought it. Say I decide to sell in 10 years' time, then a projected value of €800,000. 10 years after that, €1.6 million would be realistic. Property prices do tend to double every 10 years. So a loss of equity of €400,000 if I decide to sell in 20 years' time, assuming that planning permission is granted and the wind turbine project goes ahead. It states on the notices that the lifetime of the project is 40 years. Say I sell my property, or more realistically my estate is sold in 30 years' time, that would be a loss of equity of around €800,000. For those losing equity due to wind farms, compensation should be legislated and tax-free, as would be the case if I sold the property I use as my home. Farmers, landowners' contracts. What happens if the company goes bust? Renewable energy technologies are developing rapidly and wind power might be superseded in a few years' time. In fact, it's already being superseded. Solar power is being deployed faster than wind power. Recent reports indicate that solar and wind installations are growing at a rapid pace, but solar is being installed at a rate 5 times faster than all other new electrical sources combined. Almost every day now I see yet another property with solar. Fair play to them, I'm sure they'll be enjoying the benefits of cheap electricity. Currently the price of electricity is pegged to the price of gas. What happens if that price plummets? What safeguards do the farmers, landowners who are renting their land to Cloonkett Green Energy have? A subsidiary company set up rings alarm bells. Even if the farmers, landowners have good contracts with Cloonkett Green Energy, if that business goes bankrupt, is the parent company liable? Even if they are, plenty of examples of companies setting up other companies and disposing of their bad liabilities prior to the other stakeholders, the farmers in this case, catching wind of it. The oil fossil fuel industry is notorious for this business practice. Grants are available for farmers to put solar on their sheds, but so far I've seen only one locally. And that one's quite surprising, as when the farmer built the shed, I told them I was surprised they hadn't orientated it to maximise solar generation. The suggestion was dismissed. That was about 2 years ago. Now they have a small solar array. Even the sceptical are realising the benefits. In fact, even not locally, I've only seen that one. Solar panels on farm sheds in France is the norm. Grants were paid to the farmers to build the sheds. I was, and still am, astonished installing solar PV wasn't stipulated as a condition. Lots of very grand, some very large grand private dwellings being built around my locale at the moment. They're very impressive. Ireland certainly knows how to build mansions. It's been one of the most notable observations I've had since settling here. The huge number of really impressive large houses. I'm dismayed that none of the recent builds have solar PV as part of the original construction when it makes so much economic sense. Others with older dwellings seem to be keener, which is baffling, as surely it would be easier to incorporate solar and battery storage when the building is being designed and constructed. I guess we all have our priorities, though rooftop solar should be bumped up everyone's list. I already have solar thermal, and recently I've had a couple of companies come round and quote for solar PV. Decommissioning, who pays? And again, is the contract enforceable, or will the taxpayer end up footing the bill? I'm more in favour of the farmers putting solar on their sheds. Construction will be less disruptive than turbines, possibly as profitable for them, and ongoing upgrades may mean income for their families well beyond that which they will derive from renting their land to Cloonkett Green Energy. And of course, they'll enjoy free electricity to run their farms and homes. And I suspect in the future their agricultural equipment, as battery technology continues to improve at an accelerating pace. But the sun doesn't shine 365 and solar generation during the winter months isn't viable. Not true. Even at this latitude, 52 degrees north, solar generation is viable even during the shortest day. Anyway, during the time it's taken me to make this video, perhaps around a week, this is one of the breezier days. Wind speeds are around 3 to 5 kilometers an hour, perhaps gusting 8 occasionally. Of course, it'll be a lot windier up there, even though several of these turbines have stopped turning while I've been here, so wind speeds are barely enough for them to operate. Another but the grid can't cope with all this exported electricity. That's fine, upgrade it. Whether it's Holland, Spain, Germany, or any other country, even the USA, that's what's going to happen anyway, as the cost of domestic rooftop solar and battery storage continues to decrease and efficiency improves. Ireland, as with all countries, has strategic energy goals. The most talked about is energy security. When I look at what's happening in Ukraine, I can't help wondering whether a more decentralised energy system wouldn't be more secure. Far-fetched, but then if I'd told you to prepare for a pandemic before COVID, you'd have had similar thoughts. A dispersed energy generation and storage network would be a deterrent in itself. Instead of large-scale infrastructure and a grid with single points of failure, lots of small-scale lanes with numerous alternative routes. Even now, the levelised cost of solar PV is considered to be cheaper than that of onshore wind. A modern grid with lots of local microgeneration and storage would certainly have mitigated the impact of Storm Éowyn last winter. 7 days without electricity for some, and ESB personnel having to work in atrocious conditions to restore power to much of the country. There were wind turbines then. They didn't help. Microgeneration and storage isn't just a defence against military forces. I'm pushing the case for farm shed solar because Ireland, more than most countries, has more small farms and therefore more sheds to install solar PV on. And then of course there are all those roofs on the Gaelic Athletic Association buildings. You know, there are a couple of glaring differences between this wind farm at Ben Dash and the one proposed for Cloonkett. Ben Dash is on top of a hill where there's less obstruction and in theory wind speeds should be higher, whereas the proposed Cloonkett farm is in a gully where wind speeds are lower. There aren't any dwellings closer than 800 metres from a turbine at Ben Dash, and there are only a few at that distance, whereas at the proposed Cloonkett wind farm there are several close to 600 metres away and many more with a clear view of the proposed turbines. The roads round here are narrow. They'll need to be widened. They already subside under the weight of tractors. There will be significant disruption to the many residents. Solar PV on farm sheds puts the farmers in control of the assets. Perhaps this will provide more direct benefits to the community, cheap electricity ongoing, rather than relying on Cloonkett green energy actually delivering the estimated community benefit fund. Define community. Property owners are also the community, and those near turbines are being expected to chip in 25% plus of their property equity. Seems like a bad deal for many. I'm on the south side of the proposed wind farm and won't be affected by any flicker, though it's quite surprising just how far it carries. And one of the grand houses they're building around me is on the north side of the wind farm. It's higher up the slope, so it'll be interesting to see just how much that house is affected and those around it are affected by the flicker from the blades. Assuming, of course, that planning permission is granted. Information on the proposed development can be viewed at the Pleanala website. My apologies if I haven't pronounced that correctly. Case number 317616. I've put pertinent links in the description. If you know me, or follow my channel, then you'll know just how committed I am to renewable energy and EVs. But as I've said, neither I nor anyone else, several of my neighbours' properties will be significantly devalued as well, should subsidise the green transition over and above the rest of the population. There are alternatives. Very interesting that the communications tower has a solar panel at its base. None of the wind turbines have turned yet. I've been here for a couple of hours, during which time the sun has shone brightly. I don't actually have any dilemma. I prefer rooftop, farm shed, solar PV and battery storage over wind turbines, and always have. But if the state decides to implement the more expensive wind farm option, then I and my neighbours expect to be compensated fully for our loss of equity. I'll keep you posted. Thanks for taking the time. Meantime, good luck.